Have you ever felt the unbearable weight of guilt that can't be washed away? Imagine walking into a cold room where the silence sticks to your skin and staring at a police officer without looking away. His hands are stained, not with paint or common dirt, but with a dry red, almost too dry to be real. It's her blood, still stuck like a mark that won't go away, like a scream that echoes endlessly inside your head. He utters a sentence that cuts the air like a sharp blade. Her blood is still on my hands, literally. Have you ever imagined hearing something like that? A confession so brutal that it deconstructs any idea of redemption, repentance, or forgiveness. What you're about to discover may surprise you, because it's not just any story. It's a dive into the depths of the mind of someone who carries more than guilt. He carries a dark secret, wrapped in layers of obsession and silence. He doesn't seem like a monster, not like you imagine. In fact, he seems frighteningly calm, distant, almost empty. And that's what's truly terrifying. The coldness with which he pronounces those words suggests something much more disturbing than a simple crime. A wound that has been bleeding for years. A shadow that haunts him. Something that goes beyond the physical and invades the psychological. Stay with me until the end, because this confession is just the beginning of a journey where nothing is what it seems. Have you ever experienced moments when the truth hurts more than a lie? Here, the line between innocence and guilt is diluted like blood in water. Every detail, every fragment of this story brings an intense dose of mystery and suspense. The missing young woman, the man who knew too much, the silence of the police, and the echoes of a life that was lost in time. All of this is intertwined in a web where the true horror is far from being revealed. He wasn't someone suspicious. On the contrary, he went unnoticed, like a silent shadow in her life. But he carried an obsession that no one could see. That look on the day he disappeared, the silent steps following her every move, the words never said but felt in every gesture. Can you imagine what hides behind that silence? What is a disturbed mind capable of doing when love becomes a prison and desire a torment? The answer is not simple, and what you are about to hear will challenge everything you believe about what is right and wrong. At that moment, the room seems to close in and time slows down. He speaks as if he doesn't want to be heard, but his confession pierces the heavy air like an invisible sentence. Her blood is still on my hands. Words that carry pain, fear, and perhaps something worse. A truth that he himself cannot fully face. The coldness he demonstrates is not an absence of feeling, but the crushing weight of carrying a secret that consumes you from within. Have you ever felt something like this? A pain so deep that it corrodes even the last vestige of humanity. What makes this story even more disturbing is that he is not your typical villain. He is someone who, at some point, was close to you, who perhaps even loved you in a twisted and desperate way. It is this closeness that makes the blood that flows, not just his. It is the reflection of the torment of a life that was lost, of choices that can never be undone, of moments that burn in your memory like glowing embers. You will want to know every detail. You will want to understand how someone can carry such a heavy burden and still face the world with such disturbing coldness. What you're about to hear isn't just a confession. It's an invitation to enter the mind of someone who will never be the same again, and where the blood on their hands is just the beginning of a story that is far from over. What if what you think you know is nothing more than an illusion? What if the truth is more cruel and twisted than any mind could imagine? The next part of this story will make that clearer. But for now, let this phrase echo in the air. Her blood is still on my hands, literally. What comes after this is even more disturbing. Don't miss it. The truth is that, as this story unfolds, you will realize that every detail, every silence, every gesture carries a burden too heavy to be ignored. And that is precisely why we need to continue on this journey together. Subscribing to the channel here is not just about pressing a button. It is about being part of a community that seeks to understand the dark side of the human mind, that wants to hear stories that disturb, that provoke, and that, above all, make us reflect on what is really behind each confession, each lost look. When you sign up, you ensure that you won't miss a single fragment of this story. Because what's to come won't just answer questions, it will open up many others much deeper, full of pain and mystery. And it's this impact, this restlessness, that keeps this conversation alive, that makes these voices that many would rather forget continue to echo. So if you feel that this content touches something inside you, that challenges you to see beyond the obvious, then sign up now. It's a silent commitment, a pact to follow together on the tortuous path of truth. You won't want to miss the next part, where he reveals what really happened that night, a confession that overturns all official versions and leaves a trail of questions that no one has yet been able to answer. The pain he carries, the silence he insists on maintaining, all of this is part of a puzzle that will only be completed with the attentive gaze of those who know that the truth is never simple. And here, no one is left out. It's a community that grows and becomes stronger with each dark story that we unravel. Stay with me, because the confession you're about to hear isn't just the revelation of a crime. It's the brutal exposure of a mind that's lost in the abyss, of a truth that still bleeds inside, hidden beneath layers of silence and fear. What comes next could change everything you thought you knew about justice, guilt, and redemption. But for now, let this sentence haunt you. Her blood is still on my hands, literally. And when the next part arrives, what you'll discover may be even more disturbing. Don't miss it. She was 22 years old. Her face bore the innocence of those who still believe the world is a place where one can trust. A psychology student, with dreams carved into books and notes, hurried steps toward a future she had barely begun to glimpse. That day, the rain was falling heavily, wetting the streets and blurring the colors of the city that, from the inside, already seemed too faded to matter. She left class that night, perhaps thinking about home, perhaps worried about the upcoming tests, or with that uncomfortable feeling that sometimes accompanied her for no apparent reason. She never came back. Her disappearance was silent. No screams, no fights, no witnesses. A discreet disappearance, as if she had evaporated into the humid air of that storm. The police opened an investigation. Family members were in despair, friends held silent vigils in alleys and squares, but nothing. Just emptiness. An emptiness that hurt more than any open wound, because it was a silence that carried a question that no one could answer. What happened that night? But he saw it, or at least that's what he says. The man who now carries her blood on his hands, who presents himself with frightening coldness, is the only one who has details. Details that the police didn't have, that no one outside of him knew. And they're not just any details. They're fragments of a reality that only those who were close to her can know. He describes her leaving the building, the path she took down the dark street, her hurried footsteps that got lost in the rain. He says he saw her, that he followed her, that he heard her voice, but that no one else did. He's the only witness to the darkest night of her life. Can you feel the weight of this story? The feeling that everything is hidden under a thick layer of lies, fear, and silence. He was not a stranger. He was someone who shared the same rooms, the same hallways, who crossed eyes with her without anyone ever noticing. A face that seemed harmless, an almost invisible presence in her daily life. But that night, became the center of a storm that changed everything forever. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding who she was is not just about looking at a victim. It is about seeing a life that was full of possibilities, that walked through a world of decisions, dreams, and secret fears. It is about feeling the transformation that such a brutal loss causes in those who remain, in those who try to put together the pieces of a hidden, fragmented, often denied truth. She was not just a statistic, nor a lost page in the police station files. She was a real person, with a journey, with stories that few know. What led her to go out that night? What did she expect to find on the way from school to home? Small details that are lost in time, but that may be the key to understanding the impact of that night on an entire life that should have been. The rain, the silence, the darkness of the streets, each element seemed to conspire to erase her presence, to hide the truth behind that disappearance that no one could explain. While the police were fighting against time and scarce evidence, he was there, watching, perhaps trapped in a mindset that blinded him, perhaps dominated by decisions that he himself did not understand. Because what seems to be just an isolated act is in fact the result of a complex web of feelings, obsessions and secrets that intertwine and that we are still far from fully unraveling. Can you imagine what it means to carry the weight of knowing this truth, or part of it? Of knowing that behind that calm facade, there was an abyss ready to swallow everything. The young woman who disappeared is not just a victim, but the symbol of a tortuous journey, of a dark transformation that few dare to face. And he, with his stained hands and empty eyes, is the link that connects what was with what is yet to be revealed. Leave a word or a phrase in the comments that represents for you the feeling of loss, mystery, and pain that this story carries. I want to know how this narrative touches you, because each voice that joins this space helps to bring to light what many want to keep buried in silence. What is hidden in the shadows of this night is still far from being revealed, and the truth behind the blood that never left his hands is only beginning to reveal its secrets. He was the kind of person who went unnoticed. A quiet, discreet classmate, almost a shadow who moved through the college hallways without making a sound, without attracting attention. He never had a criminal record, never showed anger, conflict, or anything that could suggest a threat. He was the friend that no one would imagine capable of anything wrong. The one who would sit next to you, answer politely, and disappear between the chairs without a trace. But in the silence he cultivated, something much more disturbing was hidden, a knowledge that no one could explain. He knew things that the police had not yet discovered. Minute details, small fragments of a hidden truth that only the guilty party, or someone very close to him, could know. As if he had followed every step of the victim on that fateful night, as if his mind was connected to a secret that had not yet been revealed. This brought an aura of mystery so dense that it enveloped not only the investigators, but everyone who heard his confession. Because when silence hides a lie, the truth begins to scream into the void. It wasn't just her disappearance that caused him anguish. It was the way he seemed to carry the weight of that night with an almost incomprehensible coldness. The human mind is capable of building defenses to withstand the unbearable, and he had locked himself inside a psychological prison where guilt and fear were confused with indifference. There was something in his posture that indicated a deep, internal conflict, a silent battle between what he knew and what he could say, or perhaps between what he wanted to hide and what, at some point, he would need to reveal. The behind-the-scenes story makes us think about the complexity of the human mindset when faced with crime and justice. We are not just talking about facts, evidence, and testimonies. We are talking about decisions that transform lives, that alter destinies, that leave indelible marks on the trajectory of everyone involved. It is a journey that is not limited to external scenes, but that delves into the invisible layers of the psyche, where fear, regret, denial, and obsession dance in an endless cycle. As the investigation progressed, each new revelation shattered the false security that many had regarding him. The truth, which had seemed so distant and inaccessible, was beginning to emerge in pieces, revealing that his silence was not innocent. And yet, the mystery remained. What was driving him to keep so much to himself? Where was the line between what he knew and what was still hidden? At what point did guilt turn into secrecy, and secrecy into a mental prison from which he could not escape? This transformation, as delicate as it is brutal, is what makes this story so fascinating and at the same time so terrifying. It is not just about pointing fingers, but about understanding the impact that these decisions have on human life, on the search for justice, on the need to reveal what is buried under layers of fear and silence. His every word is a piece of this hidden truth, his every gesture a sign of the internal struggle that few are able to perceive. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it is in the depths of this silence that we find the true revelations. His mind, full of disconnected fragments, hides a reality that goes beyond the crime itself. It is a journey through the transformation of a person who, at some point, stopped being just a student and became someone lost between guilt and despair. Understanding this process is essential to unraveling not only what happened that night, but what it really means to carry the weight of a truth that can destroy everything. Have you ever stopped to think about how the simplest decisions can trigger a chain of events that forever change the course of a life? How fear can silence, pain can harden, and silence can be more deadly than any weapon. This story shows us that behind every crime, there's a complex web of emotions, internal conflicts, and transformations that few dare to explore. It is an invitation to look beyond appearances, to dig into the depths of the human mind, where the real battles take place. And that is why, as we continue to unravel the behind the scenes of this confession, it is important to remember that the impact of this story goes far beyond what appears on the surface. It is not just about finding the guilty, but about understanding what led that silence to become a stifled scream. What made him the guardian of a truth so heavy that it seems impossible to bear? Each step on this journey reveals more than facts. It reveals the human essence that, behind all the darkness, still seeks a form of redemption, or at least an explanation. Leave a word or phrase in the comments that represents to you the feeling of facing a hidden truth, of carrying a secret that weighs and transforms. I want to know how this story resonates within you, because the emotional memory, the pain and the indignation that it awakens are what connect us. Stay with me until the end, because what comes next will move you even deeper, bringing to light details that will challenge everything you imagined about this confession. He asked to speak. It wasn't an order. It wasn't a demand from the investigators. It was a silent request, coming from a deep place where anguish seemed to consume everything. Of his own free will, he wanted to break the silence that enveloped him. He wanted to open a window to the mind that had been holding a secret too heavy to be carried alone for so long. When the camera finally turned on, the air in the room seemed to condense, becoming dense and almost palpable. Silence took over, as if time had slowed down and all eyes were turned to him, waiting for the words, those invisible weapons, to begin to cut through the darkness. He stared into the lens as if staring into his own soul. And then, in a low voice, filled with a tension that seemed ready to explode at any moment, he began, "I need to tell you, because this is burning inside me." Those words were not just a confession. They were a stifled scream, a flame that threatened to consume everything around it. From that moment on, hell began to pour out of his mouth, fragments of a torn mind that was trying to free itself from the invisible prison of guilt, fear, and regret. It was as if each word carried the weight of a painful transformation, a journey through which he was being involuntarily led to revisit the darkest corners of his history. The psychological tension was almost palpable, permeating the atmosphere and enveloping each and every one of those present in that room. With each revealed fragment, the hidden truth was gradually revealed, like a veil that slowly fell, exposing wounds that no one could have imagined. It was an internal battle, a duel between what he wanted to forget and what he urgently needed to confess. As he spoke, it was possible to sense the complexity of the decisions that had led him to that moment. It was not just a linear account of facts, but an interweaving of emotions, fears, and rationalizations that made up the puzzle of his mind. The confession turned into a brutal exposition, an invitation to delve into the backstage of a transformation. That did not happen overnight, but was gradually taking shape amid shadows and doubts. It was a silent struggle between the desire to redeem himself and the immense difficulty of facing the truth. The feeling he conveyed was that of someone trapped in a trap created by his own mentality. Each word seemed to burn in his throat, as if saying it was both a relief and a torture. The revelations came little by little, building a narrative full of impact, where fear, guilt, and despair intertwined in a silent dance. It was a moment when time seemed to lose its logic, where past and present became confused, and where the weight of the choices made became unbearable. He spoke about the night of his disappearance in detail that surprised even the most experienced investigators. It wasn't just the description of the clothes, but the way he remembered them, as if he were reliving everything, feeling every emotion as if it were now. There was an echo of a pain in those words that couldn't be hidden, a feeling that it was all much more than a simple account. It was the vivid expression of a mind that sought understanding, that tried to find meaning in what seemed inexplicable. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding this macabre interview is essential to understanding the real impact of this confession. It is not just about crime or punishment. It is about the transformation that happens inside a person when the truth can no longer be silenced. It is a journey behind the scenes of the mind, where the decisions made shape not only destiny, but the way the individual sees himself and the world around him. It is a story of pain, regret, but also of revelations that challenge our understanding of what justice and guilt are. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to face a moment like that? What it would be like to hold such a devastating secret, burning inside you, demanding to be told? This interview is a window into that reality, an opportunity to see what is usually hidden behind the curtains of the police and the courtroom. It is an invitation to reflect on the choices we make, the lies we tell ourselves, and the impact all of this has on the human journey. Leave a word or phrase in the comments that expresses what you felt when imagining this moment of confession. This psychological tension that seems to burn inside and that transforms a life forever. The party was in full swing, lights flashing, voices mingling with the muffled sound of the music that reverberated through the walls. People laughed, danced, lost themselves in the ephemerality of that moment. Among so many faces, there was an exchange of glances. A small, almost imperceptible moment, but for him it was the trigger for what would later become an invisible prison. A rejected kiss, a silent rejection that was not accepted as a simple no, but as the beginning of an obsession that grew and took root in his mind. From that moment on, he began to create a story of his own, a narrative that distorted reality, and turned her every gesture into proof that she belonged to him, even if she didn't know it yet. This unhealthy fixation wasn't the result of a moment, but of a gradual construction, where reality mixed with desire, with the desperate need to control what he couldn't have. She was more than a colleague, more than a friend or a familiar face. She became the centerpiece of a world he created in the solitude of his own torment. That's where the real nightmare begins. The human mind has a frightening ability to transform rejection into obsession, and it's in this dark terrain that he began to dig his own abyss. Every thought, every memory, was filtered through this distorted prism. He saw signs where there were none, interpreted words and gestures as unfulfilled promises, created scenarios where fear and desire intertwined in an almost unbearable way. She was mine. I just didn't know it yet. A simple phrase, but one that carries enormous weight, a statement that reveals not only a delusion, but the beginning of a profound and dangerous transformation. This obsession was not confined to his mind. Little by little, it began to shape his decisions, influence his attitudes, and determine his steps. The transformation of his mindset was silent, invisible to those who were not paying attention to the details. But for him, each decision became a fundamental piece in this dark puzzle that was forming. What was just an unrequited desire became a cycle of thought that imprisoned him, a journey to a place where the line between love and possession disappeared completely. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject because this transformation, this internal process, is what explains the complexity of what happened next. It is not just about a crime, but about how the mind can be shaped by emotions so intense that they surpass any logic. It is an invitation to understand the backstage of a fixation, the revelations that arise when someone is consumed by a desire they cannot control, and the impact this has not only on the victim, but on those who carry this silent pain. This story shows us that behind a violent act, there's a chain of decisions and thoughts that precede the fateful moment. Each gesture, each look, each rejected or misinterpreted word feeds a hidden truth that grows until it explodes. It is a journey that mixes pain, indignation, and a distressing feeling of powerlessness in the face of what cannot be changed. And it is precisely this complexity that makes this narrative so disturbing and fascinating. Have you ever felt, even on a very small level, how an obsessive thought can dominate the mind, taking over every decision, shaping reality according to an uncontrollable desire? This story is a dark mirror of that, showing how far an obsession can take someone when it is not confronted, when it grows in the shadows of the mind, far from the eyes of those who could help. Leave a word or phrase in the comments that represents for you this feeling of obsession, transformation, and silent pain that this fragment of the story brings. I want to know how this narrative touches you, because it is this emotional memory, this indignation and identification that make this journey something real and impactful. What makes this story even more disturbing is that, despite all this growing obsession, no one seemed to realize what was taking shape there, in the silence between the lines, in the small actions that went unnoticed by most. It is at this point that we understand the importance of looking more closely, of digging into the details that seem insignificant, but that carry the weight of a dark truth. If you feel that stories like this stir something inside you, awakening that disturbing curiosity, that desire to understand what is beyond the obvious, then know that this channel is made exactly for that. Here, we will together unravel these dark plots, these invisible wounds that, many times, the world prefers to ignore. So subscribe to the channel. When you subscribe, you are not only ensuring that you will follow every revelation, every fragment of this confession that is still far from being completely revealed. You are helping to keep this conversation alive that defies silence, that brings to light the mysteries that the darkness insists on hiding. Subscribing is a way to strengthen this community, to create a space where pain, mystery, and transformation can be explored without filters, with respect and depth. It is a silent but powerful commitment that makes all the difference in ensuring that stories like this are not forgotten. And what comes next is even more intense. The next revelations will delve into the decisions that shaped that fate, into the hidden truths that are not always on the surface of the facts. Every detail matters. Every step of this journey is essential to understanding the real impact of this fixation that became a nightmare. You won't want to miss these missing pieces, because they will challenge everything you imagined about guilt, justice, and the complexity of the human mind. Staying here is more than just waiting for the next chapter. It's being part of a transformation, of a mindset that seeks to understand the darkest side of human beings so that, who knows, we can find some light at the end of the tunnel. And this is the journey we take together, because stories like this are not just narratives, they are invitations to reflect, to feel, to question. So, if you want to continue unraveling this mystery with us, be part of this community that is not content with easy answers, that wants to go beyond the surface. Now, Let's go back to the beginning of this nightmare to understand how a simple exchange of glances can trigger a chain of events that no one could have predicted. Because what you're about to discover will mess with your head in ways you might not have imagined, and will show you that sometimes the greatest terror is hidden where we least expect it. She disappeared on a night of heavy rain, the drops turning the streets into silent rivers that swallowed every step, every sound. Time seemed to drag on, as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for something no one could foresee. Everyone had a version, a theory, a motive, but his brought such a disturbing twist that it disconcerted even the most experienced investigators. "I didn't touch her," he said with strange calm, a statement that seemed like a denial, but carried between the lines an even deeper secret. It wasn't just what he denied, it was what he unintentionally revealed. He accurately described the exact location where the body was found days later. Mud, concrete, silence. Simple words that opened a door to a mystery that no one imagined would be solved so soon. How could someone who swears his innocence know such intimate details of the place where death struck? This contradiction turned the investigation upside down, causing all certainties to begin to crumble, leaving only the unstable ground of doubts and unanswered questions. The wet mud under the dim light of a random dawn. The cold, hard concrete that witnessed the end of a life. The absolute silence that surrounds everything that cannot be explained. These elements created an atmosphere of almost palpable tension, an invisible layer of mystery that still hangs over the story. It wasn't just about her disappearance. It was about what that night revealed about his mind, about the complexity of decisions that carried an impact that went far beyond the physical. It was a hidden truth that revealed itself in pieces, a journey that needed to be understood in all its depth, so that the weight of the pain could be felt in its entirety. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding this twist is essential to grasping the true scope of this story. It is not just about proving innocence or guilt, but about understanding how silence and words can create a web of emotions and secrets that affect not only those directly involved, but everyone who connects with this narrative. It is a transformation that takes place in the mind, an internal battle between what was experienced, what was said, and what remains hidden in the shadows. Every decision he made that night, every thought that went through his head, is a piece of this puzzle that takes us behind the scenes of a truth that many do not want to face. The description of the place, the almost palpable scenario that he detailed, brings to light the impact that these memories carry, the weight of knowing, the torment of remembering, the struggle to maintain control when everything around seems to fall apart. This duality between denial and revelation creates a psychological tension that forces us to look inside human complexities, to the fragility that exists behind each word, each gesture. Have you ever stopped to think about what goes on in the mind of someone who carries invisible guilt, who tries to hide what they know, but who cannot erase the traces of the truth? This story is an invitation to this reflection, an opportunity to understand the impact of choices, of the lies we tell ourselves and others, and how this web of secrets can shape destinies irreversibly. It is a journey that mixes fear, regret, pain, and above all, the incessant search for an answer that never seems complete. Leave a word or phrase in the comments that represents for you this feeling of upheaval, tension, and hidden truth that this moment in history brings. I want to know how this narrative resonates within you, because it is this emotional memory, this pain, and this indignation that connects us all to this dark journey. Stay with me until the end, because what follows will dig even deeper into this story, revealing layers that few have dared to explore, and showing that sometimes silence says more than any confession. He said he could hear her voice. It wasn't an ordinary sound, nor a distant memory, but something that invaded his mind with the intensity of a stifled scream. Sometimes in the heavy silence of the room, when the shadows seemed to stretch until they touched the walls, he felt that presence, a voice that wasn't his, but that dominated his thoughts. In the empty hallways of the college, where the echo of footsteps mixed with the silence, her voice seemed like an insistent whisper, a silent command that invaded every space of his fragmented mind. She asked me not to let anyone have her. It was an order, a request that carried a deep pain, a distorted possessiveness that felt more like a mental prison. This voice became his anchor and his torment, an internal conflict that grew in intensity, a constant clash between what his reason wanted to accept and what this psychosis imposed. The voices, or rather, this voice, were not just manifestations of fear or guilt, but symbols of a mind that was drowning in an altered reality, where the line between reality and imagination blurred in a terrifying way. The weight of carrying this torment was so great that each day he moved further away from the world that everyone knew, plunging into a solitary journey where pain and despair mixed in a dark dance. The possessiveness that had seemed so silent in their first interactions grew until it became an obsession that knew no bounds. She was mine, he thought, and no one could have her. These words, which might have seemed simple, carried a much darker meaning. They were the expression of a mind that was falling apart, a sign that the internal conflict had gone beyond all control. And it was one night, in a silent and tragic sequence, that he decided to obey that voice. It was not a conscious act, but a surrender to the whirlwind of emotions and delusions that dominated him, a total surrender to the psychosis that consumed him. That night changed everything. What was once an invisible struggle, fought in the silence of thoughts, became a brutal reality that destroyed any possibility of turning back. The transformation that occurred within him at that moment is what makes this story so shocking and disturbing. It is not just a crime, but a metamorphosis of the mind, where pain, guilt, and fear mix with a hidden truth that no one could have anticipated. It is the point where the internal conflict takes shape and manifests itself in the real world, leaving marks that do not disappear with time. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding this revealed psychosis is fundamental to understanding the decisions that were made and the impact they had. It is not just about actions or consequences, but about the abyss that opens up in the mind when control is lost, when inner voices become commands and reality fragments into pieces that not even logic can put together. It is a journey behind the scenes of the human mind, where emotions transform into something tangible and terrifying, where the impact of choices goes far beyond what we can see. This story is an invitation to reflect on what happens when pain and internal conflict are not faced, when silence becomes an internal scream that no one hears. It is a narrative that challenges our perceptions about the mind, guilt, and responsibility, showing that sometimes the greatest enemy is within ourselves, and that decisions that seem impossible to understand have their roots in invisible torments. It is a journey through the transformation of a human being in the face of the internal chaos that dominates him. Leave a word or phrase in the comments that represents for you this feeling of internal conflict, pain, and psychosis that this part of the story brings to the surface. I want to know how this narrative resonates with you, because it is this emotional memory, this indignation, and this identification that give life to this dark journey. He spoke in a heavy voice, laden with a weight that seemed to tear at his very soul. I carried the body, but she was already dead. The sentence came out slowly, each word imbued with a silent guilt that he could not hide. The blood ran down, he said, to his hand and never left. That brutal, almost palpable image hung in the air, creating an abyss between what he said and what his eyes showed. Because he swears to this day that he did not kill, that he was not the direct author of the death, but the scene he describes, the weight of that confession, tells a different story, one that escapes words but is imprinted in the shadows of silence. The impact of that revelation is not only in the act itself, but in the tension it carries, in the ambiguity that arises between the crime and his conscience. The blood is not just a physical trace. It is a symbol of the guilt he carries, of the mark that night left not only on the victim's body, but on his mind, on his heart. Each drop that stained his hands was a decision, a crossing of a limit that perhaps he himself tried to deny, trying to erase his own hidden truth. What is left behind is a trail of doubts, a tangle of emotions that defy any attempt to rationally explain what happened. This raw and direct confession shows the complexity of the impact that guilt can have on someone. It is not only the fear of punishment that torments him, but the internal weight of carrying a secret that consumes, that corrodes the soul, that transforms reality into a place where time seems to freeze at the exact moment when everything changed. The blood on his hands is the reflection of this torment, an invisible mark that will never be washed away, a constant reminder of what cannot be undone. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding this tension between what he says and what the scene reveals is fundamental to understanding the true dimension of this story. It is not just about crime or innocence, but about the internal transformation that occurs when someone finds themselves facing an abyss, when the decisions made echo in a journey of pain, regret, and above all, hidden truth. It is a dive into the backstage of the mind, where the impact of choices becomes visceral, where the conflict between what is said and what is felt creates fertile ground for deep reflection. This story invites us to think about the weight of the decisions we make, what we leave behind, the invisible wounds we carry that shape our mindset in ways we can't always understand. It's an invitation to see beyond appearances, to feel the real impact that a moment can have on an entire life, to recognize that guilt is often a shadow that never disappears, but that forces us to confront our own truths, no matter how painful they may be. Leave a word or phrase in the comments that represents for you this feeling of shock, guilt, and transformation that this part of the story brings to the surface. I want to know how this narrative touches you, because it is this emotional memory, this pain and this indignation that make this journey something so real and impactful. When the experts finally arrived at the scene, the silence that dominated this space was broken by a new and unexpected element. While analyzing every detail, every trace, the experts found something that no one had anticipated: a second body. The revelation cast an even darker shadow over this story, already marked by pain and mystery. The body was there, hidden, buried, in the same ground where the first one was found, as if the ground hid not only secrets, but a truth that time had not been able to erase. The surprise deepened when the DNA test revealed something even more disturbing. It wasn't just her DNA that was present. There was another presence, a biological trace that linked that place to a person who had disappeared 4 years earlier. An absence that until then seemed irrelevant, forgotten by the investigations and the collective memory, but that now came back to the surface with frightening force. This unexpected connection brought a new dimension to the case, a twist that changed everything that was believed to be known. The fact that this missing person had never been questioned in this case, and now, finally he would be, reveals the flaws, the gaps, and the gray areas that surround investigations of this type. The lack of answers and the existence of hidden layers reveal how the truth can be manipulated, forgotten, or even buried along with the victims. This twist not only complicates the plot, but also invites us to reflect on the decisions that were made, the paths not taken, and the impact that all of this has on real lives, full of pain and uncertainty. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this new chapter takes us directly behind the scenes of an investigation full of nuances and unexpected revelations. Understanding how this hidden truth remained hidden for so long is essential to understanding the complexity of the mentality behind the choices made, both by those who committed the acts and by those who seek justice. It is a journey that forces us to look beyond the surface, to explore the layers that make up the story, to question the official narratives and to seek the real impact of these discoveries on the unfolding of events. This new piece of the puzzle shows that the transformation that occurs over the course of an investigation is almost as profound as the one that occurs in the minds of those involved. Every revelation alters perception, every detail can change the course, and every decision made in the shadows can have lasting consequences. The complexity of this process shows that the truth is never simple, and that confronting the unexpected is an inevitable part of every journey in search of justice. Have you ever felt as if an unexpected discovery could completely change the game, shake up your beliefs, and open up a range of doubts that did not exist before? This story is an invitation to reflect on this, to understand that often the impact of revelations goes far beyond what we imagine, touching not only facts, but deep emotions that shape our view of the world. It is a dive behind the scenes of truth, where mystery mixes with pain, transformation with questioning. Leave a word or phrase in the comments that for you represents this feeling of shock, upheaval, and search for hidden truth that this part of the story brings. I want to know how this narrative touches you, because it is this emotional memory, this pain and this indignation that make this journey something real and intense. The last sentence he uttered before being taken away echoed in the room like a cryptic sentence, a kind of warning that seemed to carry more than words, a secret buried between the lines, ready to explode at any moment. She was never alone in that hole. The sentence cut through the air, heavy, loaded with a mystery that still defies any attempt at rational explanation. After that came silence, a silence that seemed to scream, that filled every empty space with unanswered questions, leaving an almost unbearable tension in the air. This silence was not the end, but the beginning of an even greater enigma, because what was found inside his backpack minutes later defies all logic, all forensic experience, all human understanding to date. Objects, fragments, traces that seem to belong to another world, that no one has been able to decipher, that refuse to be explained with the words and techniques that science and research have at their disposal. This was not just material, it was a key to a hidden truth, a portal to the backstage of a mind and a crime that goes beyond the obvious. The backpack, this seemingly ordinary object, has become the epicenter of a mystery that has not yet been resolved, one that continues to reverberate with impact at each stage of this journey. What it contained is more than evidence. It is an invitation to delve deeper into the transformation that this story brings with it. It is a provocation to look beyond the superficial, to question the mentality behind the actions, and to realize how decisions, even the most silent ones, carry a weight that can change everything. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding the meaning of these behind-the-scenes details is essential to understanding the true extent of this drama. Revelations like this show us that each step taken in this case is a crucial piece in a complex web of hidden truths, unspoken pain, and internal conflicts that go beyond what we see on the surface. It is a journey that challenges us to rethink our certainties, to make room for the unexpected, and to recognize the impact that a single word or silence can have on the unfolding of events. This story invites us to reflect on the nature of truth, on how it can be fragmented, hidden, distorted, and yet present in every detail. It is an invitation to feel the intensity of the search for answers, to recognize the depth of the emotions involved, and to understand that, often, the mystery is not only in the crime itself, but in the revelations it provokes within each of us. The transformation that this narrative proposes is, above all, an invitation to an open, curious, and courageous mindset, willing to face the shadows to find the light. Leave a word or phrase in the comments that represents for you this feeling of mystery, impact, and expectation that this part of the story awakens. I want to know how this narrative resonates with you, because it is this emotional memory, this pain, and this indignation that make this journey even more real and present. If you've stayed this far, you already know the weight these stories carry. They're not just stories. They're pieces of a truth that insists on remaining hidden. If this journey has brought you any concerns, any questions you still have, this is the place to do it. Tell me in the comments, what phrase from this case has stuck with you? It could be something simple, like, "I'm with you until the end," or "This message was for me." I want to feel this connection we've built, this sense of justice that pulses when revelations like these come to light. It's more than a video, it's an invitation to be part of something bigger, a space where mysteries aren't kept quiet. They're investigated, questioned, and confronted. And if you felt that this story touched something deep inside you, leave a like. It's not just a click, it's a sign that you want more, that you understand the importance of keeping these conversations alive, of not letting hidden truths be swallowed up by silence. Here, each like strengthens this network of people who seek to understand, who want to go beyond the official versions, who refuse to accept what is placed before their eyes without question. It's our way of responding to the conspiracy that tries to hide what should not be forgotten. There's a video here that complements this subject, and if you are on this quest, it is the natural way to continue. Click and follow me there, because this story does not end here. What follows will show that, when we dive deep, we discover that the backstage is even darker and more complex than we imagined. The transformation that you began to follow here still has a lot to reveal, and I want you to be along on this journey.